Welcome to the next episode of the B Movie Club. I'm your host, Kevin. This week we'll be discussing the 1982 science fiction horror thriller, The Thing, directed by John Carpenter, starring Kurt Russell. For those of you first joining us for the first time, what we do is it's kind of like a book club, where at the beginning of the week I'll post on Twitter and Facebook what movie we'll be discussing. You can go ahead and watch it. If you already own it, that's great. Otherwise, it's available usually on Netflix streaming instantly. You can watch it that way. And then send any of your questions and comments about whatever movie we're doing. Like I said, this week we're doing The Thing. When I posted that, I got 2 or 3 comments almost immediately saying that's one of my favorite movies. It's totally a forgotten classic. And it's really one of my all-time favorite movies. I mean, it's totally underrated. There's a lot of good things going on with it. Again, directed by John Carpenter, starring Kurt Russell. This is actually the 3rd movie we've done starring Kurt Russell. What can I say? I'm a fan. First we did Tango and Cash, which wasn't really a Kurt Russell movie. He was in it, but he was definitely playing second fiddle to Sylvester Stallone. The second one we did was also a John Carpenter movie, and that was Big Trouble in Little China, which is another one that we love here at the B Movie Club. The Thing. It takes place in Antarctica at some sort of a U.S. research station. What they're researching, I don't know. That's a good question. Never really answered. While they're there, they find a spaceship that had crashed in the ice 100,000 years ago. And they also found an alien life form of some sort. And this creature, which they call the Thing, basically is kind of an amorphous blob creature that can change shape and actually imitate people perfectly. One scene, a guy is basically being absorbed and digested by this creature, and then the creature will look like that person and act like that person, kind of an invasion of the body snatchers kind of thing to it. So then it sets up this whole thing of claustrophobia because they're trapped at this research station during a blizzard in the winter and there's no way to escape, there's nowhere to go. But also paranoia because no one knows who's the Thing. It could be one of them, it could be all of them. We don't know. That's part of the mystery. So there's a lot of questioning who's who. Are you friend or foe? This is actually a remake. There was a book, a short story that came out 60 years ago called Who Goes There? And in the DVD commentary, they kind of talked about that title was very apropos because it's not just who goes there, I can't see you. It's I see you, but I don't know if you're who I think you are kind of thing. Then, of course, there was the movie from the 50s called The Thing from Another World, which was based on the short story, but basically the special effects weren't that great at that time. So they couldn't have the kind of changing creature that the story talked about. So they basically dressed up a guy to look kind of like a Frankenstein kind of guy, kind of a plant-like Frankenstein chasing people around. This is much more similar to the original material, the original novella. Things to know about this: when you're watching the movie, there's a lot of shots of kind of open ice fields, open snow for as far as the eye can see. Those shots were taken north of Juneau, Alaska. Then they show exterior shots of the station in the snow. Those were taken in British Columbia. All the interior stuff was actually filmed in Los Angeles. And it's funny because it was actually during a heat wave that they filmed this. So guys would literally be, sweating like porkers outside wearing all their snow gear and then go inside and then they'd have the air turned down and they packed it full of humidity so that when people were acting it would feel cold. And when they were breathing, kind of that breath would come out, like the cold breath. And also during the exterior shots where there's like the blizzard going on, basically the sound of the wind was taken from Windy Point just outside of Palm Springs, which also was like over 100 degrees at the time. So it's kind of ironic, the difference between those temperatures. Who's in this show? I told you Kurt Russell's in it. There's also a whole cast of people that you may recognize, including like Wilford Brimley from like the Cocoon movies and the oatmeal commercials. Richard Dysart was on L.A. Law. Keith David, you've seen him in a bunch of things like They Live. He was in Armageddon. A million people you'd recognize. So it's kind of interesting how they were able to kind of make each character different and give each character kind of their own little moment. Because they're all different. The personalities were different. There's a lot of scenes in this where it's obvious what they were going for is kind of a psychological thriller, but there are moments kind of there are a lot of scenes with a little comic relief that they dipped in, certain lines they used to kind of break the tension. Overall, again, one of my favorite movies. There's actually a scene where basically some audiences didn't respond to this movie a lot because some of the scenes were kind of gross. Wilford Brimley is like a cowboy in real life. I mean, he's used to like hunting and kind of gutting the animals and things like that. So there's a scene he plays a biologist where he's literally performing an autopsy on one of the aliens, and he's like getting in there and pulling out the entrails and things like that. And audiences didn't respond to it. They were disgusted, but so were the other actors. Like the other actors were kind of like, oh my god, recoiling because it looked so real. Wilford Brimley, nah, no problem. He's good to go. Like I said, audiences really didn't respond to it. It was actually kind of a flop in the box office. 2 weeks earlier, E.T. had come out and was a huge success. So evidently, people wanted friendly aliens about this time. The plot was very nihilistic. Audiences just felt there wasn't any hope as to what they were going to be able to do, how are they going to be able to survive and continue on. So they didn't care for that. I mean, it's kind of funny. I mean, John Carpenter's movies in the 80s were not big successes, such as Big Trouble in Little China also. But they all went on to like have great success as kind of cult favorites after the fact. Another thing I thought was kind of interesting is Kurt Russell's like kind of signature mullet hairstyle that he has in all these movies. Evidently, these were kind of choices that he made for these movies. So, when he wasn't playing these roles, it's entirely possible his hair was short. He might have had a crew cut, for all I know. Let's go ahead. I met up with some of my buddies, and we talked about The Thing ever so briefly. Let's go to that and get their reactions. And we're back. Here we are. You recognize, of course, Tori, who's been host on the show a few times, and Chad has also been a guest. As you know, we're talking about the 1982 science fiction horror classic, The Thing, starring Kurt Russell. We actually just watched a scene a few minutes ago, one of my favorite scenes. And before we get into that, how long has it been since you guys have seen The Thing, if you recall? In its entirety, or in part?
For me, it's been 20 years.
Okay.
Well, in part, like a couple hours ago.
That's true. We just watched a scene.
In part.
And
But
you said
20 years ago, I was in Paris, and I watched it with 5 French people, and I watched the movie in French, no English subtitles. I don't speak French, per se.
so. The suspense was really.
Is that French? No, that's Latin.
Parlez-vous.
So the suspense was all psychological. It was all in my head.
And
so
the
really,
suspense
it's not a
pretty much
scary
starts
movie.
at the beginning of the movie.
It does.
From the opening credits, it's like, what in the hell is he saying?
Right.
There's a lot of that going on. And when was the last time? Prior to that.
Yeah, it's got to be, when it first came out or so. But traumatized from the dog scene at the beginning, where it just splits it open, and back for that time it was really great effects. But
So
And the part where the clown with the sharp teeth comes up is looking through the sewer grate.
that's
and the
it.
balloons,
That's Stephen King's It. That's
It-
not The Thing.
that was it.
Oh,
was-
it thing. Okay.
Never seen that one.
Okay.
We went far and wide to find experts, as you can see. People could really bring it.
Thing. Oh,
That
gotcha.
thing.
That one.
Not just thing.
Well,
That thing.
The
the
Thing.
thing.
It's different in French. So.
That is
Le
correct.
Thing.
Le-
Oh, now I
Thing.
know what you're talking about. Okay.
It's also because this is actually the third Kurt Russell movie I've done on the B Movie Club. So I felt the need to
Pattern.
to discuss
It was this
and
or Captain
explain.
Ron.
Crush?
So.
I have an unnatural affection for Kurt Russell in that way. Some would say unnatural. I would say completely reasonable.
He does the long hair well. That's for sure.
Hey, he brought the mullet when many of us were just
That's right.
didn't even think about
He
wearing
brings
the mullet.
it. Yeah, he
Overboard?
brings it.
Overboard?
He
That
does
was
long
true.
hair again.
He does.
Yeah.
He does. That was a classic. That was a classic. Of course, we did Big Trouble in Little China
Good.
not long ago. That was a good one. Had you ever seen that one, Chad?
It's been too long. It's
And
been
it was
like
in
25
German.
years.
Too long.
Actually, it was in Mandarin Chinese.
There you
But,
That's common. I mean, globally,
you know,
that's pretty
I
common.
only speak Canese, so I was
That-
completely lost the entire movie.
That's tricky.
Yeah.
Ain't no lie. That is tricky. If you have not seen The Thing, it is of course streaming instantly on Netflix. So
If you're looking for the obligatory female heroine in the theme, it's not going to happen. It's not one of those scary movies.
there are no women in The Thing, sadly. I don't think there's any in the crew either.
But there's
as far
things
as
in
I
the
know.
women. You might have to edit that.
We might have to- This is a family show. Thank you very much.
That's so
It was, right? Up until
No,
a few minutes
we've,
ago.
yeah, I don't think they would show that even on the FX network.
Wow.
Good times. So anyway, I showed you the scene, and you could tell the suspense kind of built. It's not a typical horror movie in the sense there's a monster coming down the hallway, and you know what's going to happen. Scared teenagers doing drugs.
Plus, they don't know that they could or could not be. So it's even a mystery to them.
In the commentary, they talked about whether the actors knew, like, because everyone had read the script, so they knew who became the Thing. But it was kind of a personal choice what the actors want to do with their own motivation. Do they know they're the Thing in that scene, or are they kind of surprised too? You know what I mean? The scene we're talking about is where Kurt Russell ties all the guys to the chair, and then does the little blood test. I think it's a masterpiece. They do the whole bait and switch. You think it's one person it's really somebody else.
Right.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. My bad. Movie came out,
That's what you think it is, but
30
it's
years
not.
ago.
But now you might think that.
Now, exactly. Now, the Butler did it. Anyway, well, thank you for discussing the movie with me, guys.
That
And
was great. Trebone.
glad to have you. We're peeling back the curtain. We're going to go back and play a little Dungeons and Dragons. And maybe I'll read some comic books later. Thank you very much. And there you have it. Very informative stuff. Exciting, I know. Next week, we're going to be doing a movie that is one of my favorites. It's called The Hercules in New York. It stars Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's actually one of his first roles. We're going to be discussing that next week. The Thing received 78% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, which I think is way too low. I mean, it's got to be at least in the 80s. It's a good one. Still available on Netflix. You can watch it instantly streaming. Hercules in New York is streaming instantly, so go ahead and watch that. Send me your questions and comments. What else can I tell you? I always end every episode, as you know, with a totally out of context quote, and this episode is no different. My totally out of context quote is, I don't know what it is, but it's weird and pissed off, whatever it is.